Welcome back everyone. Today we'll be taking a look at the best Pokemon fan games and ROM hacks released or updated in October 2024. Quick reminder that for a game to make this list, it must either have released or received a sizable update in October of 2024. But before we begin, make sure you subscribe to keep up with all the newest Pokemon fan games and ROM hacks. So without further ado, let's get right into the games. Starting off strong with a completed fan game inspired by the Undertale series. Now, I've never played those games myself, so I can't judge how accurate it is. I am, however, a fan of the music, so I can confirm that Poketale has a nice soundtrack. But of course, that's not all you need to have a good game. For the most part, Poketale is fairly simple. You travel a region, collect 8 gym badges, fight off an evil team, and solve a mystery surrounding the Pokemon in that world. It comes with some modern quality of life features, like the EXP All, portable PC, and Pokevile. But what personally stood out to me is the battle AI, that unlike a lot of other Spanish fan games, actually makes good decisions in battle. So while most of the fights on paper were pretty easy, the AI made them a bit more interesting. Overall, I'm personally not a fan of how simple the game is, but that's just me, and I'm sure many other players will get enjoyment out of it. Next up is a ROM hack called Regius, where you explore a series of remote islands steeped in ancient mysteries. The islands are a host to a variety of ecosystems, from a desert to even a volcano. The world has somewhat of an open world feeling to it, with the ability to surf across water gained almost immediately, and the only thing standing in your way most of the time are trainers with higher level Pokemon. Now, despite me thinking that getting surf super early would make the game a cakewalk, it actually didn't have too much of an effect, since most of the early game enemies were just grass and water types. But of course, as you've just noticed, this game does have some new Pokemon, around 50 to be exact. Some of them look pretty good, while others looked quite strange or unfinished. But considering the game itself is still a demo, I'll cut them some slack. But something I wanted to mention is the old school feeling this hack gave me. Sure, the game lacked some modern quality of life, but this wasn't exactly a bad feeling. The gameplay feels very simple, on a similar level as an older ROM hack, but paired with a unique setting and new Pokemon, that simple gameplay didn't feel that boring. Regius is a somewhat completed ROM hack, with most of the current world being explorable. The developer has stated that they are planning to add much more content, such as newer Pokemon and moves, a full story, and post-game content. Before we continue, I'm sure many of you watching have had the idea of making your own monster taming game, but might have lacked the programming skills to do so. Thankfully, however, I'm here to tell you about a tool that you can use to create your own monster taming games. And that tool would be MonMae, that just so happens to be the sponsor of today's video. Similarly to RPG Maker, MonMae is a very simple tool with very little coding or programming skills required, and even if you stumble upon an issue, there is a playlist of tutorials to show you how to do simple tasks, and a community of others already making their dream game using MonMae. But what makes fan game development so easy for a beginner is the wide variety of public assets you can use, something that many creators of will likely have an issue with you using in a commercial game. This roadblock, however, is quickly dissolved, since the MonMae bundle comes with over 120 pre-made monster sprite sets, 80 plus NPCs, 40 plus songs, a huge multi-biome tile set, and much more. And if that still isn't enough to satisfy you, there are even more assets specifically made for MonMae that you can either purchase separately or in said bundle. But thank you to MonMae for sponsoring this video, and if you're interested in purchasing, there will be a link in the description below. So this is probably the third time I'll be talking about this game, and it probably won't be the last. I already made a full video about it, and talked about it in my recent top 10 video. So I'm sure if you're a fan of my previous content, you probably already know about most of the game. But it did receive a sizable update in October, so I have to mention it here. Pokemon Odyssey is a ROM hack where you venture through a collection of underground stratums, with the option of exploring the ocean, with a regional dex of 400 Pokemon that have all received changes to their move pools, and even a few receiving new regional forms. Now, if you've played Odyssey in the past and maybe felt a bit disappointed by the lack of quality of life, then don't worry. since this new update provides a ton of that, including an EV editor and a new game mode that removes the level caps. But this update also comes with new maps and graphics, and 8 new regional forms. Pokemon Odyssey is a very well-made ROM hack that's about 75% complete, so I suggest you either jump right in or hold on to it for the completed version, arriving within the next year. Pokemon ROM hacks, despite my love for them, as a whole haven't really made much of an effort to shake up the base formula. But over the last few years, many new projects have popped up, like Odyssey, Emerald Rogue, and Safe 2, that finally shake up the normal pacing of Pokemon you're used to. But just the other day, I came across a ROM hack that follows the story of a trainer who found themselves and their friends trapped in the Distortion world, with the only way out being to travel across 5 different worlds. A premise that intrigued me immediately. The name of this hack is Pokemon Sky Blue. In this game, rather than traveling across a region, you'll travel across different worlds, each with their own people, Pokemon, and graphic styles. That's right, you may find yourself in a world looking like this, or even this, which is something that surprised me for a ROM hack. And instead of collecting gym badges, you'll have to complete tasks to obtain Nexuses to proceed to the next world. These tasks include completing the world's main story, battling all the trainers, completing side quests, and more. Now, despite the hack's intriguing story and progression system, I will say the gameplay is quite simple. The game unfortunately lacks modern systems like the physical special split and infinite TMs, since the developer wants to keep the game a Gen 3 feel to keep the game adaptable to all players, which I don't necessarily agree with, since most of those features are over a decade old at this point, and most of us are probably used to them more than not. But anyways, Sky Blue is a work in progress ROM hack with about 3 worlds to explore, so if you're looking for something interesting, I suggest checking it out. This next game is probably the second most unique one on this list. Rather than traveling a region on an adventure to be the very best, or prevent a world-ending threat, you open a restaurant. This is the Slowpoke Shack, where a restaurant simulator meets a Pokemon slice of life story. In this game, you'll operate a business where you serve different customers, and unlock more recipes as the game progresses. But don't skip to the next game just yet, as this is still a Pokemon game, with tons of Pokemon gameplay. The story takes place in a town called Silver Spring, with many different districts with different points of interest, and a ton of areas outside the town to explore and catch different Pokemon. Pokemon that appear in the overworld instead of the tall grass. But as the story continues, more and more areas will be discoverable, so while you're not exactly on an adventure, there's no short of things to do or places to explore. If you're interested in a different kind of Pokemon experience, I highly suggest checking this game out. So I've actually had a couple of people ask me for a Pokemon Yellow hack, and I'm glad I'm now able to deliver. And even though this hack just takes place in Kanto, one of my biggest problems with the region was the overused Fire Red tile set, which isn't a problem here. But anyways, this is Pokemon Velvet, a simple hack of Pokemon Yellow. This hack mostly consists of quality of life changes, from the physical special split to a ton of new sprites, but alongside those changes also come a number of regional forms, some of them being from the existing titles and others being completely new, like your starter for example, a special Dark Fairy Hatena that even follows you around outside of battle. Alongside the new regional forms, many existing Pokemon have also received new buffs to their stats and move pools. But the story remains unchanged, so keep that in mind if you choose to play. But it's still a charming experience that you should definitely play if you're a fan of the Game Boy Color titles. Second to last, we have a game that's actually an updated version of a very old ROM hack called Liquid Crystal, that I'm sure many veterans of the community have heard of. But don't worry, this version comes with a ton of new features that allow it to live up to other modern day hacks. This is Crystal Advance Redux, a hack that takes you through the Johto experience, with Kanto included as well. But I'm going to be honest, I think that out of all the Johto hacks, this one has the most amount of features, including, but not limited to, the EXP All, higher audio quality, the Fairy type, and a total of 500 Pokemon. Now, I'm sure that doesn't sound too out of the ordinary, but those are just the features common to most other hacks that I decided to list first. So let's talk about some that are unique to this game. The first one would be the season system. Depending on what month you're playing in, the area around you changes, which really increases the replayability of the hack. Secondly, every Pokemon has had improvements to their learn sets, highly inspired by hacks such as Renegade Platinum and Blaze Black. Finally, the difficulty of the game has been somewhat increased, but I wouldn't say it's nearly as hard as something like Radical Red. Overall, it was a surprisingly pleasant experience, especially as someone who doesn't like Johto. So before we get into this final hack, I want to give a quick warning that the game I'm about to talk about associates itself with Pokemon Clover. Now, I'm sure many of you understand what Pokemon Clover is and the content it contains. Yet, from what I played, the game does feel at least a lot tamer, but I still thought I'd leave the warning anyways. The name of that hack is Pokemon Cope, and it contains a wild number of Fakemon. Some of them are really well designed, and others feel quite memey. And if you know me, I really like Pokemon. But even with such a huge positive, there's something about the game that I really need to nitpick, and that's it taking place in an almost completely unedited Kanto, a region that many of us have played through many times. Of course, this game hasn't reached its 1.0 version yet, so I do hope that the devs eventually give the game its own region, or even just a modified version of the existing one. A smaller but still existing issue I had with the game was just how bad the first gym level curve felt. Despite only having a team of 3 at around level 11, after defeating every trainer available, I was expected to deal with a level 15 and 17 Pokemon. I was only able to win the fight after grinding the gym leader's first Pokemon for EXP 5 times, which felt pretty unnecessary. But overall, the game wasn't bad, and I just hope the developers do improve it. But that's about all I have left to say. I hope you not only have a nice rest of your day, but also found at least one new game to play. Anyways, goodbye!